Hi, Shayna. Welcome to the New Resilience podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty fantastic, actually.
Okay.
Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting to have you. You're one of our early guests. You've been working with us for a while, so it's really exciting to like dig a little deeper, I think, like into your background, your experience, and and essentially the goal of the podcast is for people in the field to learn from operators like you as to like what works, what doesn't work, your history. So a deeper lens into like what your experience has been that could be helpful for others. That's all we're trying to do here. So yeah, excited for the conversation.
Me too. It's a
Yeah,
noble and worthwhile cause, so I
awesome,
appreciate being
awesome.
a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's get started with your background. So I see like I love the background. I see a couple of guitars in there. Is there a story that you want to share? Like, is it something that you do actively?
Yeah, it's I mean music is something that's kind of come in and out of my life in a variety of different ways over time, but definitely a part of my identity as a person first and foremost, but also as a clinician and a practitioner in the human services field. So my master's program was this kind of dual degree program where I got the credentials for as a mental health counselor, but also as a board certified music therapist,
Hmm.
which was really cool because I got to kind of combine, clinical psychology with my more creative, expressive side, which has definitely informed my clinical practice over the years and just kind of felt like a very natural fit, being able to offer folks different avenues toward healing. Some folks really want to talk and really want to process, and others not so much. So having a more sort of hands-on, creative, expressive outlet to be able to offer people in the context of therapeutic work has really been a wonderful thing.
That's awesome. And then when you think about like, and how did you sort of like get into it? Like, were you interested in both music and like therapy, helping people at the same time?
Yeah.
Was one more something that you were inclined towards, or?
Yeah, I think, there was a point in time I was a music major in my undergrad. There was a time when, young Shayna thought that she would be a classical concert singer. So that's my training. It's in classical vocal performance.
Wow.
And a handful of instruments along the way. I play the flute. I learned a little piano. I'm still not very good, but I can get around. Guitar kind of came later, but that was sort of where I thought I would land. And then after I finished my undergrad, I moved to Boston. Didn't really know what I was doing, and sort of fell butt backwards into a human services job working with adolescents in a group home setting. And
Interesting.
yeah, I was so surprised at how much I immediately loved it. Um, and then, like one thing leads to another. Hey, what are your interests? What kind of groups might you run? What kind of activities can you bring? Music was my thing. Adolescence, of course, are, it's such a big part of
Right.
identity development at that point in your life, right? So it was just kind of kismet. I started running like lyric analysis groups and music sharing groups. This is before any kind of training or even really knowing what music therapy was. And it was just really cool and felt really good and natural. And I
Hmm.
saw the benefits of it. And so I started kind of poking around and trying to figure out, hey, is this a thing I can do for a living? And turns out music therapy is a very real, evidence-based body of practice. So I ended up going back and getting my master's in music therapy and counseling. And
Wow.
yeah,
You just happened to like run into it, but you kind of had the skills in some sense all along because you'd been training
yeah,
for it.
it was very organic.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So thank you for that background, Shayna. So like, I think you already sort of talked about like how you sort of like got into the space. You talked about like the group home setting. Was that something that you had like being in, like you said, human services? That's something that you had also always thought about, or was it just happenstance that?
It was a little bit of both. It wasn't something I had thought too deeply about. But I do kind of remember, I had done a little bit of like I'd done a little volunteer work. I had done
Mhm.
like some kind of like vocal coaching, teaching with kids, so I had definitely like done some work with other people, but it wasn't,
Right.
I don't yet like a fully formulated, this is where my career is going to go. But I do really remember, when I finished my undergrad, feeling like, I've had the privilege of spending the last 4 years just doing whatever I wanted, like
Hmm.
going to school, making friends, having a good time, learning, being a little bit like focused on myself. And when I was finished, I just kind of thought it would be nice to do something that benefited other people in some way. And I didn't really have like a fully formulated idea of what that might be, but I just, I moved, I started looking for jobs. I worked this really weird job at first that was like selling art to like random companies, like peddling artwork out of my car.
Wow.
That
How is
didn't last
that?
very long. It was
Okay.
so bizarre. It was like fun at first because like a lot of people my age at the time were
Yeah.
doing it. And I was like, ooh, we're just like selling art out of our cars.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, it got old pretty quickly. So then I just sort of started shopping around for what was next, and I came across this job working in this group home. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll just like interview and check it out. And yeah, it felt like a good fit. I didn't really know where it would lead, but it quickly felt like, this is a thing I can do. I didn't know I could do this, but turns out I can, and it's pretty fun and pretty rewarding.
And you
So,
kind of stuck at it for, so how long have you been in sort of like this industry for,
I
you would
mean, that
say?
was when I was 22, so 23 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, and over time, like you've grown into like the role of clinician and now the operator. Like, what is
Mhm.
sort of like in your view kept you going for so long?
I mean, so many things really. I think, it's changed over time. Initially it was the work with the clients. You get to
Yeah.
see your clients learn and grow and change, and you experience so many things with them. And that's a beautiful thing. And
Hmm.
I don't think I'll ever get tired of that part of the work. But I think as I progressed, supervision has really been a thing that I have found rewarding.
Hmm.
I think there's so much impact to be made. There's a ton of impact to be made, working with individuals directly. But if you can work with other people who are also going to work with individuals and groups of people, then your impact becomes sort of exponential.
Right.
Uh, and that's a really exciting thing to see when you start working with a young professional and being part of their growth process, and then you see the amazing work that they're able to do. I find that every bit as rewarding as working with clients directly.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for program development. I think when you start to had the opportunity to shape programming, really kind of look at the evidence, look at best practices, try out different interventions, try out different systems that allow people to do their jobs more effectively and spend more time attending to our clients' needs. Then you start to feel a different type of impact from a systemic position, and I find that really rewarding and exciting, and it also speaks to my creative side. I'm
Yeah.
not out playing guitar and doing sing-alongs with
Yeah.
clients more, but be like that kind of scratching that creative itch is I think a thing that definitely keeps me motivated in the operations
That's really
world.
interesting. And so, like, was the program development piece also something that you like developed over time? Is that because that's where you saw, like you said, your creative side sort of
Yeah.
being fulfilled more?
Yeah. So when I lived in the Boston area for about 18 years, and for 10 of those years I was in a residential program for adolescent girls,
Hmm.
and I started there as a clinician, and then I sort of through a little bit of a winding path. I made a job for myself. I was like, "Hey, we really need somebody doing like therapeutic activities," and created more of a role for the expressive arts to be part of, sort of a central part of the clinical model. And then I, took on administrative roles and ended up in the director seat for 6 years. And I think that was really where I sort of like developed those chops. I really sort of trial by fire, like they
Yeah.
don't really prepare you for that in
Yeah.
therapist school, but it was something that I found really interesting and exciting. And man, it's a demanding population,
Right.
And in the kid world, in the adolescent world, like the regulations, state regulations,
Hmm.
licensing regulations, accreditation, things like that are much more stringent than they are in the adult residential world. I think just by virtue of the fact that you're dealing with minors,
Right.
they all come with more of an entourage of other providers and parents and things like that. So you're accountable to so many different people. So that was, I really learned a lot in that role, having to play by a lot of different agendas and sets of rules, some good,
Right.
some frustrating, but nonetheless, I think it really it taught me a lot about how to, kind of juggle multiple contingencies and, through all of that, still try to really focus on client care and do what's right for the people in front of you.
Wow. That's a lot of pieces to sort of keep in mind and optimize sort of all at
Yeah.
once. And you kind
Yeah.
of just learned that on the job that you created for yourself. So
Yeah, it just yeah, it kind of started with that, and I think that was good too, because when you're not working with a pre developed template, you just
yeah,
have to figure out like what the needs are and what the best way to meet the needs might look like, and
right.
some of it's trial and error, and some
Yeah,
of it, stuff that you can borrow from pre-existing examples or evidence. But
yeah,
I think a lot of good can come from both, from, taking examples of what works, but also developing your own creative solutions.
yeah. That's fascinating. Um, so then let's go through continue on that journey. So I wanted to like talk about a little bit about Averte and like
Yeah.
again the role that you have now like recently stepped into from like being a clinician to an operator. So maybe if you can like talk a bit about that, maybe start with a bit about Averte, the program, and then
Yeah,
essentially your sort of journey here. That would be great.
sure. Yeah. Averte is a wonderful place. We are a therapeutic community residence for adults who are seeking support with their mental health. Um, we intentionally keep that broad too. We are open to anybody 18 and up. We're gender inclusive. Length of stay varies, from 1 month to 40 years, anything in
Wow.
between. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Wide age span, wide, duration and care, and clinical need is also incredibly diverse
Hmm.
here. And I think part of wanting to keep our model flexible and fluid, um, is because, so many times we hear these stories of, I got turned down by this program because this isn't real, my need doesn't really fit what they do, or I'm too much of this and not enough of that for this other program. And I completely respect the role of specialization in anywhere in healthcare. There's
Hmm.
definitely a place for that, and it's important. And at the same time, not every human being fits neatly in one of our check boxes, right?
Right.
And there has to be a place for those people. And I think Verte is kind of, we pride ourselves on being a place for those folks. Um, and some folks, again, there's value to structure, there is value to consistency and standards, and also sometimes people's needs are a little bit in between those
Hmm.
things. Having the room to flexibly attune and respond and design care for each individual's unique needs is, I think, a really beautiful thing, and something that we can offer in ways that not every program can. So that's a little about us. And with that said, I came aboard about 2.5 years ago as the clinical
Hmm.
director. When I started, our clinical team was pretty teeny tiny. It was myself, one other clinician, and two skills specialists,
Okay.
a clinical intern. And we've grown a little bit since then. We've added a rehabilitation counselor. We just actually yesterday brought aboard our recreational therapist. I'm really
Well,
excited about that.
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's just been a really fun process of like rounding out our clinical services to, really try and find different creative ways of meeting people's needs. And I think having folks with different types of specializations on the team really allows us to meet people where they're at clinically, as well as, kind of being a part of a broader,
Hmm.
um, flexible framework throughout our program.
Got it.
Yeah. So that was my role for the first year and a half, about.
Right.
Um, about a year in, we opened up our outpatient clinic,
Hmm.
our integrative mental health practice down in Lebanon, New Hampshire. And that kind of fell under my purview. So a little bit after the opening of that program, I stepped up into the senior director of clinical services for New England.
Hmm.
Um, and then, yeah, a few months back, I found myself in the vice president of operations role. So
Hmm.
now I'm overseeing all of it. And yeah, it's been a lot of shifting and changing. It's almost been nothing but shifting and changing the
Yeah.
entire time because we're an organization that has been through a lot of change over the past several years. And the idea is to grow and keep trying to find different ways to
Yeah.
support folks out there who need support with their mental health. So
Yeah. We'll
exciting.
definitely get to the growth aspect because I mean that's a big part of like what we
Yeah.
sort of like want to talk about here. But before
Yeah.
that, like sort of just want to like maybe talk about your journey of like how you went from again the clinical side to the operator side. And the other thing to sort of think about is again people end up in the operating side or like the role of like a CEO or like a VP from like different paths. I want to understand from you, like from a clinical perspective, there's probably a unique perspective that you bring as well. So maybe talk a bit about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll always be a clinician at heart,
Yeah.
like that's my training, that's what brought me into the field. That's what really it really I think it really drives everything. It's the lens that I look
Hmm.
through, and also I understand that not every single person I'm interfacing with
Yeah.
has the same lens, has the same training, and I love that. I think that's where real magic happens. And I think part of the reason that I don't know. I'm almost like addicted to residential work. I left it for a little while, for a couple of years, and I got sucked right back in because there's something so unique about everybody, an interdisciplinary team working together in the place where our residents live. There's
Hmm.
this really unique synergy that happens when you have folks from different backgrounds, different areas of expertise, different lenses that they're looking through, coming together and trying to find the best possible approaches and interventions in treatment that we can possibly develop. So I think having that clinical lens not only gives me it's not only informed by my technical training, so to speak, but I think it helps me as a supervisor and a manager and a leader because I think I'm accustomed to sitting with a person and being present and listening and trying to understand, not just what I'm seeing and hearing, but what story might be underneath that.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that's really important when you're trying to bring a multitude of perspectives and agenda and kind of synthesize that into cohesive decision making.
Right.
Um, so I find myself grateful for that over and over again in ways that surprise me all the time.
That's yeah. And I guess at the base of it, it really is again sitting with the client at the end of the day and like they're really the center of everything. So that is a hugely important part of running an operation, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll always have an appreciation for, the fact that other people on a team might, their role and their reason for being part of a team or part of a conversation might be very different than mine. If I'm sitting with our IT folks or our HR people, or, like
Hmm.
we all have different roles to play.
Hmm.
But I continually find myself in roles that, when you whittle it all down, it's about advocating for the best client care and what's best for our residents. And so I can, always stay open, I think, to other people's perspectives and what they're trying to accomplish,
Hmm.
while also standing firm in my sort of advocacy role for doing what's right for the people we serve.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. Um, let's talk about I think maybe like as you stepped into like the operator role right now, you talked about growth, but even before that, are there how do you how are you thinking about Averte for let's say the next few years? Like, do you have sort of like a vision in mind of like where you want to like take this place? Maybe start a bit about that. Uh,
Yeah, so many ideas. Oh my God. Um, So right now, honestly, we've been through so much transition, and I think it's finally catching up with us a little bit that everybody's
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, we have not stopped for like 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's been nothing but change. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an element of change management that feels really important, just to keep our culture healthy, our staff, the staff culture is so important because it exists again in the place where our residents live.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's really been something that we're focused on at the moment, I would say. Just kind of, getting the right staff in the right positions, really helping everybody kind of come to a point of clarity in in terms of what their role is in treatment. I think there's been so much shifting of that for the past several years that we just kind of need to support everyone in feeling grounded in why they're here, what's their purpose, what's our purpose as a collective, and what's your particular role within our organization and within the scope of our residents' treatment. Um, so we're kind of in a stabilization process right now, I would say. Not in any kind of scary or unsettling way, just in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like taking care of the people who take care of our people.
Sure.
Uh, just feels like it's
Yeah.
an important priority at the moment. And then in terms of where that leads us, I think once we really have that sense of like, okay, we know what we're doing and we've got this,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that so many amazing things can happen. One of the things I'm most excited about right now, because I mentioned we have our recreational therapist on board,
Yeah.
and in staff meetings over the past couple of weeks been sort of previewing like what her role is going to be about and what she's going to be doing. And I really saw, as I was talking about her role in sort of leading some of our enrichment and activity programming and engaging our residents in both individual skill building as well as group opportunities and things like that. I saw so many of our staff's faces just kind of light up.
Mm.
Uh, so as I was talking about, this is going to just be her role. This is going to be her supporting all of you to engage in this
Yeah.
this aspect of our program. So be thinking about what it is that you want to bring to that, like what parts of yourself, your personal interests, maybe could inform programming, because if we're excited about stuff, our residents are going to get excited
Yeah.
about stuff.
Yeah.
So, I could kind of see
Yeah.
the thoughts percolating and people's, affects lighting up a little bit. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. I think that we're, in a month we're going to have some really exciting new programming. I'm not sure what it's going to be yet, but I ideas are already starting to pop up. So I'm pretty pumped about that. Um, and we
That's
also have a
exciting.
couple of, yeah, yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. And, we have a couple of changes to our leadership team happening. We have some new positions that we're introducing, just kind of doing some reorganizing of our structure to, again, make sure that we have the right people in the right places to support different parts of our program the way that they need and deserve to be supported. We've got some really great, smart, experienced people coming on board. So I think we're going to have even more ideas coming to the table. So, there is kind of an element of unknown that I'm kind of excited about
Yeah,
because
sure. Of course.
I want to hear what people have to say. I want to
Mm.
hear what they have to bring to the table because I think, probably when we all put our heads together, we're going to think of things together that I wouldn't have thought of myself.
Right.
Uh, and then, of course, I do have lots of ideas about where I want to go. I think a lot about our independent living program. I think there's a lot of room for growth and development there. Our rehabilitation counselor, part of her role is overseeing our independent living program. So I think, thinking of ways we can make that a more robust experience for our clients, a more intentional experience for our clients is something I get
Mm-hmm.
really excited about. That might mean expanding. It might just be, kind of taking what we have right now and integrating different ideas to engage people differently. Um, Certainly our integrative mental health clinic. I think there's a lot of room for collaboration between Averte and integrative mental health. We recently signed an agreement with United Assessment, which is a fantastic organization that does high quality neuropsych evaluations, psychodiagnostic evaluations, you name the kind of evaluation, and they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and they're amazing. So
Yeah,
that's some,
Dr. Rowe is amazing.
yeah,
So,
yeah, Dr. Rowe, he's great.
yeah.
So, thinking about like how we can sort of, weave some of those types of partnerships into our programming in different ways. Um, and then, there's we always have the option of creating partnerships with individual practitioners. I'm really interested in maybe at some point we contract with a music therapist, an art therapist, an occupational therapist, an acupuncturist. I mean, I'm kind of a
Mm.
granola, Vermont hippie girl at heart in so many ways. And I think about what wellness is, and that means something different to everybody. So
Everyone. Yep.
our nutrition program, looking at how we integrate movement into people's lives, just give them different options for, kind of having a menu of options for people to choose
Mm.
from that really aligns with their goals and their ideas about what their path to wellness might look
Mm.
like. Yeah,
Fascinating. And in some sense, like you're giving credence to like also your creative side that allows you to sort of like play with a lot of these different ideas. And I'm guessing what you're talking about is like meeting clients where they are, and because of the diversity of like the people that you are like trying to serve, different things might work for different people,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about like growth a little bit. So like you talked about like how you're yeah looking to grow Verte as it is. Like when you think about growth, like what comes to mind? Are you thinking about like expanding like just the census? Are you like thinking about like additional levels of care that you're talking about? Or like what are some of the dimensions that you're thinking about and how you're sort of going about some of those initiatives?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an evolving conversation at the agency level at
Mm-hmm.
the Trivium leadership team.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that initially when Averte was acquired, the idea of growth in the New England area was sort of like maybe more within the definition of expansion, whether that was acquisitions and mergers or
Mm-hmm.
increase in census. And I think that that's all still on the table. But I think, again, for right now, we're talking a lot more about organic growth. So kind of taking what we have already and making it the best possible program it can be. And maybe even like, evolving service lines or different service options out of the existing program. So again, assessments is a great example. Or
Mm-hmm.
we a couple of years ago we created our wraparound program. So folks, when they discharge from Averte, they still have a link to their team at Averte to sort of support them through the transition from residential to whatever their next steps are. So finding ways, I think, to kind of expand the continuum,
Mm.
whether or not that means adding beds or merging
Right.
with other organizations, really just thinking about how can we stretch in every direction as far as we possibly can to support a smooth transition among different levels of care for our clients. And I think there's still a lot more room for that, even within the existing structures that we have.
Got it. And does
Yeah.
that come with like expanding on the programming that you're essentially talking about that goes on to the clients?
Yeah, I think so. So when we a few months back we kind of rebooted and revamped one of our houses that had just kind of been like, kind of a one of the houses that didn't really have as definitive an identity as our others. And we decided, well, it needs one,
Hmm.
And also when we think about our continuum of care, we have our main campus, which is where most of our residents start. It's 24/7 awake staff, so it tends to be our higher acuity residents, our shorter term residents. It's just kind of a good place for folks to start, and then until we kind of assess their needs and figure out what their trajectory is going to look like. Um, and then they may move on to one of our other houses that's a little bit, gives them a little bit more freedom, a little bit more community access. And so
Hmm.
that we kind of capitalized on that a little bit. We kind of decided to lean into that with this particular house. It used to be called the Gray House. It's now called the Birch House. And we're really sort of thinking about it as that more transitional level of care. So there's a pretty big gap between the level of support you get in residential services
Sure.
and what you might experience in independent living, right? And we felt like there's got to be something in between. There's got to be something that helps prepare people
Mm-hmm.
for that next step and helps them feel confident that when it's time for them to move into their own apartment, whether that's with us or on their own, they really have some tangible skills that they can implement and integrate to make sure that that transition is successful. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really kind of what we're focusing on with the revamp of that program. And
Okay,
I think
got it.
even within that, thinking about like moving from that program to independent living, again, how can we make our independent living program feel um, more intentional in terms of what we offer, rather than it just being a collection of apartments. And like, if you want to come over to one of the houses for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
are there things that we can be doing in terms of community integration, vocational support, helping build a support network outside of Averte, or, making sure that if we are checking in with you in your apartment, it's really kind of connected to your treatment plan goals. And we're helping you continue along the path that you want to be walking.
Mm. Fascinating. And at that point, like you're still continuing supporting and like observing the client in like some sense as they go through like all of these different stages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Um, and I think that's another area of our program where, it's very individualized. And I think there's always room for growth in terms of in terms of the thought process, like what informs the way that we think about a person's needs. Certainly
Mm-hmm.
each individual is the loudest voice in the room, their goals are our goals. But we've talked a lot about like utilizing assessments to understand better what are the strengths and needs that we're working with relative to a person's goals, or looking at community resources and trying to find, not all interventions have to come from us and our team. There are plenty of other resources in the community, and that's a healthy development track for a person to be on, right? Is to
Right.
become integrated member of their community, and not just, we don't want people to only have the tiny world of Averte. As much as we love
Yeah.
we love being that world for people, we want them to be able to grow in other directions. So thinking about how we can partner with other organizations, and utilize other resources in the community, I think is another opportunity for growth for
Got
us.
it. So it's a lot of collaboration between like other organizations and like you in
Yeah,
some sense. Does it also happen where it's not just like a one-way transition where there might be people who are in this community integration situations and they might need to sort of like get an additional level of care so this relationship could like work both ways in some sense?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's part of why I actually did a presentation on this, about the concept of a continuum of care. And we think about that as a program, thinking about having different levels of support within our program, but also thinking about how that extends to the larger community, because then the options really become, limitless, really. And I think, part of one of the many benefits of that is, healing's not linear.
Mm-hmm.
Therapeutic work is not just a straight line. And sometimes folks do, they take 3 steps forward, but then maybe they need to take a step back, and making sure that they have a supportive safety net that doesn't judge or shame them for needing a little bit more support,
Yeah.
even if they had made some progress. I think that's really, really valuable. And having that supportive network of familiar people and familiar systems, just makes those transitions and those changes in levels of need even more seamless.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Like I was just reading up something about, again, sustainable business development, like then the idea of collaboration, like between different organizations and like levels of care. So, which is why this point really resonated.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah. Um, um, let's talk about maybe also on the growth side, something that we typically talk about on a regular basis, like the idea of metrics and like KPIs. So when you
uh,
think about it from like an operator perspective, yes, there's a creative side, but I'm sure like you're also looking at like the quantitative side of it. So from your
yeah.
standpoint, like what are some of the top KPIs or like metrics that you are like either accountable to or like consistently like tracking so that you are and that helps you balance like growth with like sustainable client outcomes, etc. How do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a great question because it's a reality of we are still a
Right.
business.
Yeah.
We still have to have
Yeah.
enough revenue coming in not only to cover our costs, but ideally to
Yeah.
have enough funding to do all the exciting programming that we want to be able to do
Yeah.
and to support folks who maybe aren't as easily affording care as some others. So having that financial flexibility is definitely a sustaining factor in the quality of the care that we provide.
100%.
Yeah, so it's a reality and it's important to think about, and it is an area of focus for us right now. So we're always looking at business development through the lens of outreach and admissions and making sure that we're maintaining relationships with our sustaining partners who provide us with referrals. Um, and again, that's part of the continuum as well, because if you can
Yeah.
have that warm handoff and make informed decisions about what you're recommending, then the more the client's going to benefit. But, at the end of the day, heads in beds is our primary source of revenue. So that's definitely something that we track. We look at the comings and goings of folks to make sure we understand, what our revenue stream is really doing. We are looking at, as you know, we talk about this all the time. We're
Yeah.
looking, where are our most fruitful referral relationships, thinking about what we can do to nurture those relationships and really make sure that if we're investing a lot of time and money in not only fostering existing relationships, but hopefully developing new ones.
Hmm.
Understanding if that return on investment is really there, and kind of looking at what are the bang for your buck sorts of uh,
100%.
outreach and marketing endeavors in terms of, folks coming our way looking for placement, looking for services.
And like, do you see like in your cases, are there like particular kind of relationships or like sources that are more suited for you than sort of others? Because like when you think about like optimization, ROI and such, it really is a game of prioritization. So,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say, we spend a fair amount of time we work a lot with hospitals. Hospital systems tend to be a pretty robust referral source. We have hospital systems that we work with a lot, New York
hmm,
Presbyterian, Silver Hill, McLean. And they're great folks to work with. Those are longstanding relationships and other similar systems. A lot of therapeutic and educational consultants we find to be really valuable. And again, we have some that we've worked with for a long time who, we're a go-to referral for them.
hmm,
And I think it's always worthwhile to invite people over to check us
yeah,
out. Have
yeah,
have a
all right,
lunch, talk about the program, show them around. Because I think, feedback we get time and time again is that it's so much easier to recommend a program if you've actually been there, you've actually talked to people, you can kind of feel what it feels like, see what it looks like, and feel a sense of connectedness there rather than, yeah, I looked at the website, they say they do this, give
yeah,
it a
yeah.
shot,
It's very impersonal that way. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I would say that those are two sort of types of referral partnerships that we put a lot of time into. Certainly we get referrals. We get a lot of other residential programs
Hmm.
referring to us. We have really strong relationships with the programs in the American Residential Treatment Association. We are a member of ARDA.
Right.
And that's a really cool organization because it's very, you would think it might be like competitive because we're all kind of in the same market, but it's actually quite
Right.
collaborative and cooperative. And I think at the end of the day, everybody just wants that we want clients to find the place that's best for them. So if someone
Right.
comes to us and we're like, you know what, you definitely would benefit from support. We're not sure that we're the right one, but we know this great program in Massachusetts or in Northern Vermont.
Mm.
Um, have folks that we can call and again, kind of do that warm handoff and make sure that they get to the right place where their needs are going to be addressed in the best possible way. So those are really important relationships for us too. It's kind of a what goes around comes around sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, 100%. Like
Yeah,
it's yeah, good karma and all of that.
exactly, exactly.
Uh, that makes a lot of sense. And when you think about like the relationships, are you continuously trying to foster new ones as well? Like, and how do you strategically think about that? Maybe shed a lit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a never ending thing, I think.
Right.
You know, and a little over a year ago, we decided to hire our national outreach manager, Kristen,
Hmm.
who is, man, she is just a ball of
Yeah.
energy. And she
Yeah.
is, I could not think of a more perfect person for that
Yeah.
job. You know, you need somebody who's like
She's out
exuberant and
there doing it.
motivated and like,
Yeah.
she can talk to anybody about anything for any amount of time. And she's a great ambassador for the program. She's enthusiastic and passionate. She's,
Hmm.
anytime we're doing something new, she will, give me the information. I'll learn it to make sure I'm weaving it into conversations. So that's really that she really does a lot of that outreach for us and has been so valuable in nurturing a lot of the existing relationships, but also creating new ones. She goes to a lot of conferences, she hosts networking events.
Yeah.
Uh, and honestly, she's done some creative things that I might not have thought of. Like at the upcoming Cape Cod Symposium, we're co-hosting a s'mores cookout event on the beach,
Very cool.
which it's like so cute and fun. And like, who wouldn't want to go to that, right? So, she's going to go and eat some s'mores and talk about a verte and, use her shining personality to make connections. And,
Yeah.
hope new partnerships will be born of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds fantastic. I'll try to go to that too
Right?
if I can get invited.
Yeah. You're invited.
Awesome. Um, I guess like one of the other things that I had in mind was um, something that we hear about a lot is around a lot of the administrative work or like the manual work that's there and like being able to like run the operations and something that we again try to help with as well. But um, is there almost like a vision or like a an ideal situation that comes to mind for you as to like how much different could things be if like the amount of administrative or like the manual work was like reduced significantly or like and where
Yeah.
do you see like the biggest opportunities for doing that?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. Yeah. And having worked in other settings where like paperwork requirements and, Medicare and Medicaid requirements where, like the more entities you have sort of
Yep.
monitor what you're doing, the more uh extensive the requirements are. We're fortunate that we're a private pay,
Hmm.
uh, privately owned and operate. Like we have a lot of flexibility, but the administrative demands are intense because the work that we're doing requires a lot of internal monitoring, in addition to external monitoring. And it's just complex. There's just a lot going on all the time. And I actually have been having a lot of these conversations over the past couple of days, as we're getting ready to welcome some new members of our leadership team. And, already I'm hearing some really great ideas that align with my own ideas about streamlining systems across our sites as much as we possibly can to, take out the guesswork, de-silo some of our operations, and help. I think a big thing is helping people feel confident that they they know what they're doing, no matter what part of the organization they're working in.
Hmm.
Uh, I think predictability it equals safety and confidence for so many people, right? I talk about this through the
Yeah.
lens of informed care for our clients. But I think it's true for us too, that if we can confidently say, oh, well, I was, I've been giving medication at the main house for the last year, and now I'm working a shift over at the Bradford house. It's the same over here. So I know what I'm doing, right? So I think it instills a lot of confidence. It saves a lot of time for everybody involved. So I think streamlining systems across parts of the organization has a lot of value, and that's something we're talking about as a leadership team at Trivium as well. That the more consistency, the better.
Hmm.
Uh, and I also think that, communication, centralized systems that multiple people can access without having to exchange 10 emails about it, or
Yeah.
having that like visibility and transparency, and open communication, I think also helps to cut down on
Hmm.
excess excess time expenditures that
Yeah.
none of us really have to give.
Yeah.
So those are some, like, I guess, broad strokes thoughts that I have. And I know, we have some more specific things that we're looking at from house to house or from department to department, thinking about clinical and residential,
Hmm.
um, and medical, the more visibility and centralized communication and operational functions we can create, I think the easier everybody's life
Yeah.
become, the more bandwidth we have to give back to our clients.
And this visibility would extend across like you're saying, like every department. So even for like intake or like admissions and marketing or like being
Yeah.
able to look at analytics and
Yes.
data across the board.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, I mean, New Resilience is a great example of that, right? Like having Noah, our admissions coordinator, be able to input data, based on inquiries he's receiving. And then for Kristen, who's all the way in New Jersey, to be able to log in and see, like, oh, I see that Noah got a call from
Hmm.
someone new over the weekend. I wonder where that call came from. Oh, look, they were referred by
Hmm.
this person that I met
Right.
at fill in the blank conference, right? So then, and then we're developing analytics that tell us, where are these referrals coming from? what you know what um what did we do to facilitate that
Hmm.
relationship that that informs future decision making, and that can all happen within a couple of clicks rather than us having to
Right.
get a whole meeting together every single time, right?
Right.
That is just readily available.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I want to talk about like maybe get your take on like the business and like in the current landscape too. Like, do you see like in the current landscape, sorry, you've been in residential for some time and you're looking at also like outpatient different levels of care. Are
Mhm.
there any trends that you're seeing that like are fairly new that had not happened before, which are particularly relevant when it comes to like thinking about growth, thinking about business
Yeah.
that people need to be thinking about?
For sure. Yeah, and I'd be curious to know if other folks in similar settings are seeing similar trends. But I certainly something we hear largely anecdotally, but I think data will probably tell us a similar story over time. I think I'm not going to get on a political soapbox here, but I think there has been a lot of change at the federal level in terms of where federal monies are going. I think that has people kind of on edge and feeling uncertain about where money is coming from, where money is going. Am I going to be able to afford certain types of services in a month, in a year? A lot of our folks have different payer sources that some are plentiful and that's great for them, others not so much. So I think
Hmm.
particularly among folks who are really thoughtfully trying to use their resources in a meaningful way, they I think have to think very critically about, is this the right use of my limited resources? Am I really going to get the outcomes that I'm looking
Hmm.
for? Or am I going to spend all this money and then find that, like, I'm no closer to the place that I want or I want my loved one to be.
Hmm.
Um, so and I get that, who
Yeah.
wouldn't be thinking about they're large sums of money. It's
Yeah.
not something to be taken
Yeah.
lightly. So we're very aware of that. And our finance team has been working with our operations team to kind of think about, where can we lend some flexibility. Certainly, again, we need to be a sustainable business,
Hmm.
but also we want people to be able to access the services that they need as much as possible. So, like, where can we give a little bit of flexibility? Where can we offset costs elsewhere to make something more accessible, whether that's somebody can extend their stay a little bit longer, maybe they can move into a different part of our program and we can work with them.
Hmm.
We're thinking a lot about that,
Hmm.
and trying to create price points that fulfill as many needs as possible, both our business needs and the needs of our clients.
You mentioned something about also helping the clients and like their families take the decision around, hey, like this is the right place for me to be, like I said, very rightly spending the limited resources that I might have. How do you achieve that? Like, I'm
Mm.
sure like when again a family or a client is evaluating, they have multiple options. Like, how do you sort of like help stand out or help make them make that decision for them?
Yeah. I think transparency goes a long way, particularly at the beginning of care. I mean, it's always important. It's always something that I think is really critical to developing effective therapeutic rapport with both residents and their families. But I think just being really clear about like who we are, what our model is, what kind of services we offer so that people can make informed decisions. You know, there's certainly something to be said for a sales pitch, especially when you're trying to build new referral partnerships. But when you're working with people who are looking for help with their mental health, I think being really honest about what we are and what we are not is really important. We certainly don't want anybody saying, wow, Averte seems like the perfect place for me. And then, it's
Yeah.
like a bait switch where they're like, wait, this isn't at all what the website said, or this isn't at all what we talked about
Yeah.
admissions at intake. So I think just being really, really honest. And if folks say like, yeah, we're not sure, we might be looking for something more like this, that's where those other partnerships, those karmic
Yeah.
give and take relationships like we have with other residential programs come in really handy because they work both ways. If we say, hey, if you don't think this is the right fit for you, we get it. Here are some other places you might check out. We know that's going to come back around to us in some other way. So I think that's just a really important. It's an important way to start treatment, no matter where it goes. But I think it's also really helpful when families are trying to weigh their options and make the best possible decisions for their loved one with their resources.
Yeah. That that makes a lot of sense. One more thing that I wanted to touch on was, again, as you're like going from like the clinician side to the operator side, something I think you kind of touched on this before was around maybe like how excited employees are, like employee morale and something. And that's something that we hear a lot about where people are often burnt out. And I'm sure if, again, you have someone who's experienced in this turnover, um, that's a huge impact to not just the organization, but also maybe the clients that they were servicing. So how do you think about that? How do you cope with that? Or like, how do you even put systems in place or like the culture in place to sort of prevent that? If
Yeah. I mean, I'll use the transparency word again. I think sometimes, especially when there's a lot of change happening, even if it's not intentional, if leadership isn't intending to leave
Mhm.
people in the dark, sometimes it just happens accidentally. I've been guilty of it when, change is happening, you get busy, your attention gets, kind of
Yeah.
consumed by other things. And I try to really remain open to feedback, and I have been going to staff meetings and just trying to kind of be responsive to what I'm hearing. And one of the things I've heard from our staff is like we just want to know what's going on, which is
Mhm.
fair, and so just kind of taking some ownership over the fact that like, yeah, with change comes people get busy and it's, communication can sometimes lag a little bit. So trying to really do a lot better with that, be more present, be more communicative. And a little goes a long way. I have found, like if I just am, going to a staff meeting and saying, hey, we have like this person onboarding next week and this person is coming into this position in a couple of weeks, like they're so happy to just have that information and feel like they not only know what's going on, but what's coming, what they can expect. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because with change comes that uncertainty. It's like that blank space on the page, and people fill that in with what they think might be happening,
Right.
not necessarily with what is happening until you give them what is happening.
Right.
Um, so I think that's been something that I'm trying to be more cognizant of as a leader, um, and I think it really helping people feel like they have a voice that matters. We don't all win every battle every single time. Of course, we
Mm.
can't make everybody happy with every decision that we make, but if people at least feel like they are a stakeholder in the process, like they can exercise their voice, be heard, feel like their voice and their place in the organization is valued, then I think we can all withstand things not going our way or change happening a little bit better if we feel like somebody cares about us in that process, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that those things are really important: transparency, communication, and helping people feel like they matter, like their work is valued and important, and their voice is heard.
Yeah. I think transparency is something that you're like talking about is like a key aspect of like every
Yeah.
interaction that you're talking about, whether it's partners, it's clients, it's employees. I guess like even here, not to talk about like systems specifically, but there something that just just from a practices perspective that you put in place to like increase the transparency you talked about? Again, like making sure that you do develop that personal repertoire and like keep people in the know. But
Yeah.
besides that, like, are there systems in place that could help you do that, so that you don't have to do all of the heavy lifting in some sense?
Yeah, when I started at Averte, and I came on board right after Averte was acquired by Trivium. So already like huge change
Yeah.
process were underway and people were feeling that. And again, not by virtue of any like bad intentions or anything like that, just big adjustment for
Yeah,
everybody.
it's the nature
Yeah,
of those things. Yeah.
exactly. It's just kind of the way that it goes. But when I started, the way that our residential programs were structured was striking to me. We had support staff, which we have retitled those folks as residential coaches. That was a thing that I advocated for. One title to me sounds kind of passive, and the other sounds more like a person who has a role in treatment. Um, and so we had our support staff and then we had our program managers. And that was the structure of our residential department. And I was like, wow, that's a really big gap but in
Hmm.
in skill set, right? Like if we have a manager leave, do we have support staff who have the skills and experience to step into that role? Because that's a big jump.
Right.
Uh, so something we've been actively working on for the past couple of years is creating more of a pathway for growth for our
Hmm.
staff. Um, Kind of scaffolding different tiers of leadership opportunities. So we now have the senior residential coach, and part of that role is taking more of an active role in treatment and also in systems oversight, which alleviates alleviates the crunch for everybody, right?
Hmm.
Program managers get somebody else on their team who is helping with some of the administrative responsibilities, and that's a skill building opportunity for the staff. And our clinical team also has other folks who are running groups and doing some individual coaching. So they don't feel like they have to do all of it. There's somebody on site who is also supporting the treatment goals in a very tangible way. And again, that benefits the client, it benefits the team as a whole, and it benefits the individual who is doing that work because they're acquiring new skills. And if they want to grow within the company, they now have more of a
Right.
pathway. So we're continuing to, that's some of the other leadership positions that we have in process right now, where, we developed a case manager position, we developed an evening shift coordinator position, an assistant manager position. So we have these different tiers of opportunity for folks who want to be on an upward growth trajectory, but we
Hmm.
also more people sharing in the responsibility, which again, I think creates more of that visibility and transparency and communication naturally, and also
Hmm.
gives people real opportunities to gain skills and contribute in a more active way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then so that you have more of these people coming into specialized roles, but we also, I think, in some sense, talking about the collaboration between them, so that they're in the know, the transparency is all sort of built in there, and that's the culture that you're trying to sort
Yeah,
of
exactly.
propagate.
Yeah.
Uh, those were sort of like definitely some of the questions that I had. I did want to like, I guess, end with like one last question around like, if you were to like lend like a piece of advice for someone who's like, you know, just starting out in like the industry, like, what would
Mm.
that be?
That's a really good question, Pranoy. I would say I would say you just got to kind of dive in and try some things and see what feels right. When I kind of, I think back to the beginning of this conversation and reflecting on my own experience, like
Yeah,
I had no idea this would be the field that I would end up
right.
in. I was a musician. I liked to sing, and it turned out that that was kind of like a gateway to a whole other way to make use of that part of myself than I expected. So I think, I would just encourage anybody, at the beginning of their career in this field to just, look at who you are and what feels natural to you and try some stuff out because there's probably a very real place for your unique skills and passions and interests to fit and help other people.
Okay. Just be flexible, see
Yeah,
what works, and then
my
yeah, you'll
stuff and
figure
be,
it out.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else that you might want to add, Shayna? Or
I don't know. Just grateful for everybody else out there who's doing the good work. You know,
yeah.
there's a lot of need. There are a lot of people who need support, and this work will never not be worthwhile.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. That's a really hopeful note to sort of end on. But no, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate you being here and being a partner with New Resilience. Uh,
Absolutely.
okay, awesome.
Yeah.